almost all of that will depend on Judge Tanya Chutkan. I want to bring in now former federal prosecutor Glenn Kirshner, who is at the courthouse for today's proceedings. And part of the reason I want to talk to Glenn is not only because of that, but because, Glenn, as I understand it, in your career as a federal prosecutor, there was at least one case in which you were the counsel on the prosecutor side, and Judge Chutkan, before she was a judge, was defense counsel in that case. And so you squared off against her in the courtroom and have experienced her professionally in that way. Is that true?
It is true. Back in the day, I tried cases against Tanya Chutkan. She was a public defender in the District of Columbia. I was an assistant United States attorney at the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office trying murder cases, and we were adversaries. I would say she was a worthy adversary, but perhaps I should ask whether I was a worthy adversary to her, because I will say, Rachel, she was a smart, strong, tactically savvy defense attorney who I can honestly say I enjoyed trying cases against, and I promise you I don't say that about all defense attorneys. But together with being a very strong, zealous advocate for her client and very good in front of a jury, she was also completely honorable, honest, trustworthy, and I think she always sought to strike a good relationship with opposing counsel, myself included. I also happened to run into her today in the cafeteria, which was lovely. She was getting lunch, as was I, and we reminisced a little bit about back in the day when we would tangle with one another. I've also had the pleasure of being in her courtroom more recently, watching her preside over criminal cases. And I'll tell you, I was so heartened when I heard today, I was in the overflow courtroom watching the proceedings, and when the magistrate judge told the parties, Mr. Prosecutor, you will file a motion in 7 days proposing a trial date. Defense, you will file a reply in 7 days proposing a trial date. And then 25 days from now, August 28th, Judge Chutkan will set a trial date. The defense protested, I believe, 3 times. The magistrate judge was having none of it. So I suspect this is a sign of things to come. Judge Chutkan is going to run a very tight ship, and I suspect we're going to see a fair but also fairly speedy trial.
Glenn, this is totally unfair, but I'm assuming when you ran into her in the cafeteria, she didn't say anything about the Trump case, right?
She did not, nor would I have expected her to.
Good. I just have to ask. I can't leave that hanging. Let me ask you, Glenn, based on all that you've described, her reputation precedes her. She is seen as an experienced, normal, smart, effective, strong judge. I think that's fair to say, and I don't think anybody, even who might have disagreed with some of her opinions, would say anything different about Judge Chutkan. But we've already seen defendant Trump attack her. Already, she has attacked her as an unfair judge. That was today. And I wonder what your perception is about the kind of spotlight she's going to be under, the kind of heat she's going to take, and the kind of presumably rhetorical aim that this defendant and his supporters are going to take at her. How do you think she'll handle that?
You know, he will rhetorically attack her the way he has rhetorically attacked everybody. Judges, jurors, witnesses, prosecutors, and their family members. I would like to think she will be unfazed. It's sort of intensely unfair that a litigant gets away with the kind of attacks Donald Trump always launches against his perceived enemies. I have to say, Rachel, I was just a little let down when I didn't hear the prosecution at least raise the possibility of some narrowly tailored restrictions on the defendant's speech and on his posts. We may get there because there were some admonitions that you better not do anything that could be perceived as tampering with juries or with witnesses. But, I'd like to say she will be unfazed, and she is strong, she is tough, she is determined. But it really is not the way the criminal justice system should be expected to operate, with defendants, litigants being able to hurl these kind of invectives against judges. All of that being said, she is going to move through this. We have a phrase in the D.C. criminal justice circles, and I'm sure other people have the same phrase. When there is a judge that we appear before who is tough, who is no nonsense, who is determined to hold everybody accountable, the litigants, we say, you know, that judge don't play. Well, Judge Chutkan don't play.
Former federal prosecutor Glenn Kirshner. Glenn, thank you so much. We appreciate it. I want to show all my colleagues here at the table something that I have not seen. Ready to do something live on TV none of us have seen before?
Yes.
The first sketch from the courtroom. There it is. God, I love courtroom sketches.
It's a real Maddo A block signature.
I will say that you have not been to my house in Western Massachusetts, but this is my art. I've got courtroom sketches everywhere. I've even got a courtroom sketch of Andrew Weissman. In my house. I kid you not. Even before I had met Andrew Weissman, I bought a sketch of him.
Rachel, dare I say that's very on brand.
Thank you very much. I know.
If people didn't think you were a nerd, they just locked it in now.
The only thing in my life that is different from what you see when I'm doing the news is that I sometimes go fishing.
I was going to
Other
say
than that,
fishing.
I go home and cuddle up with courtroom sketches. It's exactly the way you
I didn't know you could acquire them. You know,
Oh, yeah.
You know, when I'm gonna have.
She's a guy. She's a guy.
I need some.
Yeah. Well, anyway, this is the
That's
first.
it.
This is the moment where the sketch artist Bill Hennessy, who is freaking fantastic, where he captured the moment at which Trump stood and faced the judge and pled not guilty. Our friend Steph Rule joins us here at the table.
I don't have any courtroom sketches,
Are you asking?
but I'm here. But
Are you asking?
I'm here.
I don't know.
I'd like a photo shoot with Andrew Weissman.
I think there's going to be some sort of charity auction coming up, so we'll work that out. Let me ask Steph, as we were watching this, obviously there's a lot about an arraignment that is preordained. We know that there's going to be a heavy security presence, that there may be some protesters, that the defendant will rise, enter a plea, and leave. But there were some unexpected things today in terms of the way that Trump interacted with this magistrate judge and the way things look like they're going to speed ahead.
To me, the biggest surprise today is that this is a huge legal day and it is not a huge political day. Just think about that for a moment. The current Republican frontrunner is Donald J. Trump in a mountain of legal jeopardy, and his party, the party of law and order, is standing by their man. He has got them so boxed in because of the grip he has on their base. And I just think we all need to process the fact that this judge had to instruct him, do not speak to witnesses. Do not do anything that would even appear that you're committing an additional crime. And people just need to get their head around the fact that this person, who most likely will be the Republican nominee, and the party seems to be down with it, is charged, is accused with defrauding you, me, and every other American. And they've got a half a dozen other people running for this position.
I was thinking about the admonition about the jury tampering, which is funny only insofar as, you know, were you to say, tamper with a jury member, try to persuade them, you can't turn around and be like, well, that's speech. Oh, I'm not supposed to. Oh, I can't persuade people now.
Yeah.
Right, yes, exactly. Some speech can be committed in furtherance of crimes not protected by the First Amendment, and the fact that the judge had to instruct him that that was the case, like, no, that's not okay. And like the idea of it too is like, to me, it so perfectly embodies what's in the indictment, which is just working everyone over. If everyone's around, you can work them over. Get me that person, get me that election official, I'm going to work them over. The jurors, I'll work the jurors over, right? Like, it's perfectly in line with what he is accused of doing in the indictment to try to do something.
As you put it the other night, you have free speech, even in a bank, to say anything except give me all your money. That is speech. You are not allowed to say that in a bank. That is then a crime. To your point, Steph, about this being a day in politics, there is one thing that happened in Republican presidential primary politics. To the control room, I'm talking about SOT number 6. Republican presidential primary politics today, in which former Vice President Mike Pence, who I think everybody's expecting we're going to see on the stand, in this case, he gave remarks to Fox News, and Lawrence O'Donnell alluded to this earlier on, in which he put a finer point on it in terms of what Trump did. And I just want to get your political take on it, because I want to hear from all of you guys, and we're actually going to get Zoe Lofgren's reaction to this as well. But this is Mike Pence speaking today to Fox about Trump in a way that I've never quite heard him talk about him before. Watch.
Let's be clear on this point. It wasn't just that I asked for a pause. The president specifically asked me in his gaggle of crackpot lawyers asked me to literally reject votes, which would have resulted in the issue being turned over to the House of Representatives, and literally chaos would have ensued. People can read the indictment, and frankly, I've said before, I had hoped that it had not come to this point. You know, I don't know if the government can meet the standard, the burden of proof beyond reasonable doubt for criminal charges. But the American people deserve to know that President Trump and his advisors didn't just ask me to pause. They asked me to reject votes, return votes, essentially to overturn the election. I rejected that out of hand, and I did my duty that day.
That is the boldest and, dare I say, most casual we've ever even seen Mike Pence. Perhaps he's realizing at this point Trump's base, who they're all still trying to dance with, ain't never voting for Mike Pence.
Right.
Potentially he is realizing that and maybe trying this Hail Mary pass to find old school Republicans. The original Republican Party, which, by the way, at this point doesn't exist. These George Bush Republicans we talk about, you can't get enough of them to create a big golf outing at this point. But it looks like Mike Pence is going to try to find them.
Imagine being Mike Pence, right? You do this thing that you think
does all the time.
Yeah. I understand it.
I just
Just put a little baby powder in your hair.
He calls me mother.
But really, I mean, like, this guy runs for president thinking he's going to be rewarded by at least some part of his party for standing up for the Constitution on January 6th, and the opposite happens, right? He is shamed in that party. He is being shamed as a candidate. He is being booed. And now the indictment comes out, and you gotta think Mike Pence, maybe unlike the rest of the field, maybe he took a glance at it. And reliving those moments, reliving that pressure campaign, I don't think it is coincidence that the day after 2 days after the indictment comes out, Mike Pence is finally like, yeah, actually, this wasn't nothing, Because his initial reaction in the hours after it came out, when I don't think he'd read it, was more like, I upheld the Constitution, let's not talk about this, let's focus on failed Biden economics. 2 days later, maybe when he's marinated and stewed in the juices of injustice and outrageousness as detailed in this indictment, he's actually speaking the truth, and also under the awareness that he's going to have to go.
He can't run away from it.
He can't run away from it.
And that Bidenomics is working.
And let's not forget that one of the most memorable lines in the indictment is, Mike, you're too honest. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, the idea of speech, to your point, Chris, what proves that Donald Trump really didn't believe he won the election is the things he did. If you really thought you won the election, you don't need fake electors. Right? I mean, you don't need to create a scheme to flip the election if you really actually think you won. There's the line in there that seems to be in quotes that says, we're going to let the next guy handle it. Mm-hmm. Bust it again. Mm-hmm. And then you've got the fact that he allegedly said to Mr. Clark, who he wanted to be the AG, he, I guess, and Clark were saying to other Justice Department officials, just say there was fraud and let the Republicans take care of it. Yeah. So he's actually using speech as well. And in some cases, there are things in quotes, which apparently they cannot just do unless they're from tape or from contemporaneous notes, in which Donald Trump is admitting, oh yeah, I didn't win the election, but I need to fake it. And I'll just throw a couple other things to your point, Steph. So Lindsey Graham and Ted Cruz came out and attacked Judge Chutkan.
Who they confirmed.
She was confirmed 95-0. Yeah. They both voted to confirm her, and now are claiming that she's got inherent biases and hates Trump. But when y'all voted for her, you agreed with all the other Republicans in the Senate. Yeah. She was A-OK.
And where does Lindsey Graham want the trial moved to? The
West Virginia.
There is. West Virginia.
Yeah. Everybody should be able to move their trial to wherever they have the most friends. That's in the Constitution, isn't it? Of course. Let's bring in Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren, Democratic Congresswoman from California. She served on the January 6th investigation in Congress. Congresswoman Lofgren, it's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you.
Happy to be here.
So this arraignment today has a lot of elements of it that we could see coming that are the part and parcel of any booking for any federal defendant. But we have also seen some news here with the magistrate judge and the district court judge apparently planning to move things, talking together, coordinating, planning to move things relatively quickly. We've got a first hearing date, August 28th, and we are told that a trial date will be set on that hearing date. I have to ask, just for your reflections on today and what you think is important about what's happened.
Well, I think that is important. Certainly, we had a few items before this judge in terms of getting evidence and the like, and we prevailed. But more importantly, she acted promptly. She doesn't mess around, and I think it's encouraging that she's going to control her courtroom. She's going to set a date, and we're going to have a trial, and then we're going to find out what a jury decides. So I think that's good news for America to find out what the outcome of this will be, and hopefully pretty soon.
So much of the indictment read like a version of your own investigatory report. There was a lot of overlapping evidence. There were some new things in the indictment, some things that were further developed by the Justice Department's investigation. But I wondered about the distance, and there was some distance, between the actual charges that were brought against Trump and the charges that you and your committee recommended should be brought against Trump based on the evidence as you saw it.
Well, I think there's a lot of overlap. The major difference is our recommendation on the incitement measure, and I think Mr. Smith obviously didn't follow our advice there, but I'm perfectly satisfied with the action that he's taken, and I know that the other members of the committee are as well. The essential elements, which was he tried to overturn the election, is encompassed by the charges that are in the indictment, and I think that's the important element. Reading through the indictment, it's really the narrative that the committee outlined. There are a few things, you're correct, we weren't able to interview Vice President Pence. Now, I was stunned by his testimony, Trump telling him, "You're too honest." I think that says a couple of things. One, that he was being honest, but two, Trump was being dishonest and needed the vice president to join him in that. So I think the trial will be held promptly. There will be evidence that we develop, but also some new things. And by the way, I was listening to the critique of the former vice president's statements today. I served with Mike Pence. I haven't talked to him in a while, actually, since the January 6th, when I was one of the tellers. He's going to testify pretty obviously, and he's going to testify truthfully. And he might as well say publicly now what he's going to be saying in that courtroom. There's no downside to that.
Congresswoman, it's Alex Wagner. Speaking of Mike Pence, one of the most quietly, for me at least, explosive elements of this indictment was the fact that he was taking contemporaneous notes. Did the January 6th committee know about these notes? And what are you most interested in as it concerns this apparently detailed timeline that was that was written down in real time during the unfolding of events around January 6th?
Well, I did not know about those notes, and I don't think any of the investigators or other members knew. We talked to his counsel, we talked to his chief of staff. We didn't get that information for them. For all I know, they didn't know it. That he did that is going to be very important in terms of his testimony. There were a lot of things that we're interested in. The bullying that then President Trump did to try and get him to overturn the election, to reject the votes. We never really found out the details of the conversation between him and Trump the morning of the 6th. The Vice President was with his staff and went upstairs to the residence to take the call. I'm interested in that, but clearly there was a lengthy effort on the part of Trump to try and get the Vice President to reject his oath and to overturn the election, and he just refused to do it, to his credit.
Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren, a key member of the January 6th investigation in Congress. Congresswoman, thank you for being with us today. It's a historic day. We appreciate it. All right, our special coverage of the federal arraignment of former President Donald Trump continues right after this statement.